In Seoul, winter doesn't just arrive, it transforms the city into something else entirely. The cold comes down from the mountains, sharp and unforgiving, turning the Han River into sheets of silver ice and the streets into corridors of breath clouds and hurried footsteps. Everyone moves faster in winter. Heads down, hands buried in pockets, rushing from warmth to warmth. Which is why most people don't notice the ones who have nowhere warm to go. I noticed. And on a December evening when the temperature dropped below freezing and snow began to fall in heavy, silent curtains, I made a choice that seemed simple at the time. I gave my winter coat to an old homeless man huddled in a subway entrance. What I didn't know was that the man wasn't homeless. He wasn't old in the way I thought. And the coat I gave him would become the thread that unraveled everything I thought I knew about power, perception, and the invisible architecture of Seoul's hidden world. My name is Aisha Thompson, and this is the story of how one act of kindness changed my entire life. I moved to Seoul 3 years ago for a teaching position at an international school in Gangnam. 29 years old, Black American, fluent in Korean after years of study, and determined to build a life in a city that had fascinated me since I was a teenager watching K-dramas with subtitles. Seoul was everything I hoped it would be and nothing I expected. Beautiful and brutal. Welcoming and isolating. A place where you could reinvent yourself or disappear entirely, depending on what you were looking for. I lived in a small apartment in Itaewon, taught English literature to high school students, and spent my evenings exploring the city's endless layers. Art galleries in Samcheongdong. Bookstores in Hongdae. Late-night cafes where I could write in my journal and watch the city move past the windows. I wasn't wealthy, but I was comfortable. Stable. Building something that felt like it might last. The coat was my one real luxury that winter. A long wool coat in deep burgundy, bought on sale but still more than I should have spent. It kept me warm through Seoul's harsh winters, and I loved the way it made me feel, put together, professional, like I belonged in this city of impossible standards. But on that December evening, standing outside Dongdaemun Station at 7 p.m., the coat suddenly seemed less important than the man I saw sitting against the wall. He looked ancient. Gray hair tangled and unwashed, clothes layered but inadequate, hands trembling as he held a small paper cup that probably contained nothing but a few coins. His face was weathered in a way that spoke of years exposed to elements and hardship. And he was shaking. Visibly, uncontrollably shaking. People streamed past him. Thousands of people, bundled in their own coats, carrying shopping bags and coffee cups, moving through their warm, comfortable lives. No one stopped. I don't know what made me different that day. Maybe it was the literature I'd been teaching, Dickens and his Ghosts of Christmas, themes of compassion and consequence. Maybe it was being so far from home during the holidays and feeling the weight of isolation. Or maybe it was just that when our eyes met, his and mine, I saw something that made him real to me in a way that made walking past impossible. I stopped. I said, using the respectful term for an elderly man. You must be freezing. He looked up at me, and for just a moment, I saw something flicker in his eyes. Surprise, maybe. Not that someone was speaking to him, but the way I was speaking. In Korean. With respect. I'm fine, he said, his voice rough but steady. Thank you. You're not fine. It's below freezing. I was already unbuttoning my coat. Please. Take this. I can't accept. Yes, you can. I draped the coat over his shoulders before he could protest further. It's warm. It's clean. And I have others. That last part was a lie. This was my only real winter coat. But standing there in the December cold, watching this old man shiver, the lie felt necessary. He pulled the coat around himself, and I saw his hands, scarred, weathered, but somehow elegant in their movement. Not the hands I expected. Thank you, he said, looking up at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. This is very kind. It's a coat, I said, smiling. Not kindness. Just basic human decency. In this city, he replied quietly, those are the same thing. I left him there, hurrying toward the subway entrance with snow beginning to collect in my hair. I felt cold immediately. Seoul's winter doesn't forgive exposed skin, but I also felt something else. Lighter. Like I'd done something that mattered, even if it was small. What makes this moment significant is not the gesture itself. It's that the man I gave my coat to had been watching me for 3 weeks. And I had just passed a test I didn't know I was taking. 3 days later, a package arrived at my apartment. The building security called up, said there was a delivery that required signature. When I went downstairs, the security guard handed me a large box wrapped in expensive paper, tied with a black ribbon. Who's it from? I asked. He shrugged. Courier service. No return address. Inside my apartment, I opened the box carefully. And stopped breathing. It was a coat. Not my coat, something else entirely. Cashmere, long and elegant, in a shade of deep forest green that somehow felt exactly right. The kind of coat that costs more than I earned in a month. There was a note, written in precise Korean calligraphy on heavy cardstock. Thank you for your warmth. Please accept this small gesture of gratitude. The cold season is long, and you should not suffer for your kindness. No signature. No name. Just those words and a coat that felt like it had been selected specifically for me. I stood there holding the note, trying to make sense of it. Homeless people don't send expensive coats to strangers. They don't have money for courier services or calligraphy or cashmere. Which meant the man I'd given my coat to wasn't what he appeared to be. The realization was unsettling in a way I couldn't quite articulate. I thought about going to the police. But what would I say? Someone sent me an expensive gift and I'm suspicious? That would sound absurd. So I kept the coat. And wore it. And tried to convince myself that maybe he'd been someone down on his luck temporarily. Maybe he'd gotten back on his feet and wanted to pay forward the kindness. But the quality of the coat said otherwise. The precision of the note said otherwise. And the feeling I had, like I was being watched, observed, assessed, that said otherwise too. 2 weeks later, I found out the truth. It happened at a school fundraising event. One of those formal evening affairs where donors and board members mix with teachers and students. I wore the green cashmere coat, partly because it was beautiful and partly because I was curious to see if anyone would react to it. The event was held at a luxury hotel in Gangnam. All marble and crystal chandeliers and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. I felt out of place immediately. Teachers weren't usually invited to the donor portion of these events, but our principal had asked me to give a short presentation about our literature program. I was in the lobby, rehearsing my remarks quietly, when I heard a voice behind me. The coat suits you better than it did me. I turned, and the world tilted slightly. He stood there, but he wasn't the man from the subway entrance. Or rather, he was, but transformed beyond recognition. Clean-shaven, hair cut and styled with silver at the temples, wearing a suit that probably cost more than my annual rent. He looked distinguished, powerful, maybe mid-50s rather than ancient. His posture was straight, his presence commanding in a way that made people in the lobby unconsciously move around him like water around stone. "I'm sorry?" I managed. "Your coat," he said, gesturing slightly. "It was mine. I had it made in London last year. When you gave me yours, I thought it was only fair to return the favor. The subway. The cold night. The man I thought was homeless and helpless. You weren't." I couldn't finish the sentence. "Homeless?" "No." A slight smile. Though I was genuinely cold that evening. "The coat you gave me was very welcome." "Then why were you?" I stopped, aware that we were in a public space with donors and board members nearby. He seemed to understand my hesitation. "Perhaps we could speak somewhere more private?" I'd like to explain. Every instinct told me to refuse. This situation had gone from odd to potentially dangerous. But curiosity, and something else I couldn't name, made me nod. He led me to a private room off the main ballroom. Elegant, quiet, clearly reserved for VIP donors. When the door closed behind us, he gestured to a chair. Please, sit. I know this must be confusing. Confusing is one word for it. I remained standing. Who are you? My name is Kim Jinho, he said simply. I'm a benefactor of this school. And several other institutions in Seoul. The name meant nothing to me, but something about the way he said it suggested it should. That doesn't explain why you were sitting in a subway entrance pretending to be homeless. I wasn't pretending to be anything, he corrected gently. I was sitting. Observing. Seeing how people behave when they think no one important is watching. This is where perception shifts. You were testing people? I was understanding people. He moved to the window, looking out at the Seoul skyline. I've spent decades building networks, managing organizations, influencing outcomes. But somewhere along the way, I lost touch with simple humanity. With how ordinary people interact when they're not performing for power or position. So you dress up as a homeless man and sit in subway stations? Occasionally. He turned back to me. I learn more from those hours than from months in boardrooms. I see who stops. Who doesn't. What people reveal about themselves when they think there are no consequences. And what did you learn from me? That you see people. His expression was hard to read. Not positions or status. People. You spoke to me with respect. You gave me something you needed yourself. And you did it without hesitation or expectation of reward. Lots of people would have done the same. No, he said quietly. They wouldn't. I've sat in that spot dozens of times. You're one of 3 people who stopped in 2 years. The weight of that statement settled between us. Why are you telling me this? I asked. Because you deserve to know who you helped. And because. He paused, choosing words carefully. Because I'd like to know you better. Aisha Thompson, literature teacher, originally from Atlanta, been in Seoul for 3 years. You volunteer at the community center. You send half your paycheck home to help your younger sister with college. You're learning Korean calligraphy in your spare time. My blood ran cold. You've been investigating me? I've been learning about someone who showed me unexpected kindness. His voice remained calm. In my world, kindness without agenda is so rare it requires understanding. Here's why this moment changes everything. Because standing in that elegant room with this powerful stranger who knew details about my life I'd never shared publicly, I had a choice. I could be afraid. I could report this to someone. I could walk away and pretend it never happened. Or I could recognize that something unusual was unfolding, and decide whether I wanted to be part of it. Your world, I said slowly. What exactly is your world, Mr. Kong? He studied me for a long moment. I manage networks of influence across Seoul. Business, cultural institutions, civic organizations. I facilitate connections. Solve problems. Maintain certain equilibriums. The carefully neutral language wasn't accidental. He was telling me something significant while not saying anything concrete. You're talking about organized networks, I said. The kind that operate behind legitimate business. His expression didn't change. I'm talking about power structures that exist whether people acknowledge them or not. I ensure those structures serve useful purposes. Useful to whom? To Seoul. To the people and institutions that keep this city functioning. He moved closer, but not threateningly. Miss Thompson, I'm not asking you to approve of my work. I'm simply explaining why your kindness mattered. In a world of calculated moves and strategic relationships, you acted from genuine compassion. That's rare. That's valuable. I'm a teacher, I said. I don't have anything to offer someone like you. You have something I spent 2 years searching for. His voice was quiet, intense. Perspective. Honesty. A way of seeing people that isn't corrupted by power or position. The real tension isn't physical, it's psychological. What do you want from me? I asked directly. Your time. Occasionally. Your insight into human nature, which I've observed is unusually accurate. Your honesty, which I suspect you can't help even when it would be easier to lie. He paused. And perhaps, eventually, your trust. You think I'm going to trust someone who's been investigating me? I think you're someone who makes decisions based on evidence rather than fear. I think you'll consider what I'm offering before you reject it. And what are you offering? Protection, he said simply. Seoul can be difficult for foreign nationals, especially women working alone. Having someone watching out for you isn't a small thing. Resources when you need them. Connections when they matter. And perhaps something else. What? Friendship. The word seemed to cost him something to say. I have many associates. Many business relationships. But very few people I can speak with honestly. You proved yourself capable of seeing past appearances. That makes you more valuable than you realize. I walked to the window, looking out at the city lights. Seoul spread out below us, millions of lives intersecting in ways invisible from this height. If I say yes, I said carefully, I'm not agreeing to anything illegal. I'm not becoming involved in whatever networks you manage. I wouldn't ask you to. And I want honesty. If you're going to be in my life in any capacity, I need to understand who you really are. Not the polished benefactor version. The actual person. He was quiet for a long moment. That's more than I've offered anyone in 20 years. Then maybe it's time you did. What develops over the next 3 months isn't what I expected. Jinho doesn't involve me in his business. He doesn't ask me to do anything questionable or compromise my position. Instead, he does something stranger. He shows up. At the coffee shop where I grade papers on Sunday afternoons. At the art gallery exhibitions I attend. At the community center where I volunteer teaching English to elderly Korean students. Not intrusively. Not possessively. Just present. We talk. About literature and philosophy. About what it means to wield power responsibly. About the loneliness of being perpetually misunderstood. He tells me about growing up in post-war Korea. About building networks out of necessity, about the gray areas between legitimate business and survival, about choosing to shape systems rather than be destroyed by them. I tell him about growing up black in America. About choosing to come to Korea knowing I'd always be visible, always be other. About finding strength in difference rather than trying to disappear into sameness. We are, in many ways, opposites. He operates through invisible influence. I exist in highly visible difference. He spent decades building masks. I've spent my life learning when to take mine off. But we understand each other. And slowly, carefully, something shifts between us. It's not the dramatic romance of K-dramas. There are no passionate declarations or grand gestures. Instead, it's quieter. More substantial. It's the way he brings me tea without asking how I take it, because he's noticed. The way I recommend books knowing exactly which ones will resonate with him. The way we can sit in comfortable silence, which is perhaps the truest measure of compatibility. It's also the way he protects me without making me feel protected. When a difficult parent at school becomes aggressive about my teaching methods, the situation resolves itself mysteriously. When my visa renewal hits bureaucratic complications, they untangle overnight. When I'm followed home one evening by someone making me uncomfortable, I never see that person again. Jinho never mentions these interventions. But I know they're his work. And instead of feeling controlled, I feel seen. Valued. Cared for in a way that respects my autonomy while acknowledging that having someone powerful watching out for you isn't weakness, it's wisdom. What makes this figure fascinating is the contradiction. He wields enormous influence but values simplicity. He controls extensive networks but craves genuine connection. He spent decades building power but finds peace in conversations with a literature teacher about poetry and human nature. Why me? I ask him one evening. We're at a traditional tea house in Insadong, rain streaking the windows, the smell of green tea and old wood in the air. You could have anyone. Why invest time in someone so far removed from your world? He's quiet for a long time. Then, because you gave me your coat. That can't be the only reason. It's not the gesture, he explains. It's what the gesture revealed. You saw an old man in need and responded with immediate compassion. No calculation. No hesitation. No thought for what you'd lose. He looks at me with an intensity that makes my breath catch. In my world, every action has 3 purposes and 7 contingencies. But you? You act from instinct. From humanity. And it's the most remarkable thing I've encountered in decades. I'm not remarkable. I'm a teacher who gave away a coat. You're a woman who sees people other people have learned to be blind to. His hand reaches across the table, not quite touching mine. Including me. You see who I am beneath the influence and authority. You're not intimidated by my power, but you're not attracted to it either. You respond to me as a person. Do you have any idea how rare that is? The vulnerability in his voice is completely at odds with everything I know about his position. I see you because you let me, I say softly. You could have stayed the mysterious benefactor. You chose to be real instead. I chose to trust you. His fingers finally make contact with mine. Warm. Gentle. And I'm choosing to keep trusting you. If you'll let me. 6 months after I gave my warm winter coat to an old homeless man in a subway entrance, I'm standing in Jinho's private apartment overlooking the Han River. It's not what I expected. Not the cold, modern luxury I assumed powerful men surround themselves with. Instead, it's warm. Books everywhere. Art that clearly means something to him personally rather than serving as status symbols. A space that feels lived in, thought in, cared about. I want to show you something, he says, leading me to a room I haven't seen before. It's a study. And on the wall, framed with care, is my burgundy winter coat. I stop in the doorway, staring. I had it cleaned and preserved, he explains. I know it probably seems strange. But this coat represents the moment my life changed direction. When someone reminded me that power means nothing without humanity. I walk closer, looking at the coat I'd almost forgotten about. It seems smaller now, less significant than the green cashmere that replaced it. But seeing it here, preserved like art, transforms its meaning. You could have just said thank you, I say. Thank you felt insufficient. He stands beside me. Aisha, I want you to understand something. I've spent my entire adult life building influence. Managing networks. Maintaining control. But that control came at a cost. I became someone who saw people as assets or threats. Who calculated relationships like chess moves. Who forgot what it felt like to connect with someone simply because they mattered. He turns to face me fully. You reminded me. Not through words or lectures, but through one instinctive act of kindness to someone you thought could never benefit you in return. And it made me want to become someone worthy of that kindness. The real tension isn't physical, it's emotional. What are you saying? I ask quietly. I'm saying that I'm falling in love with you. The words come out raw, unpolished. I'm saying that for the first time in my life, I want someone to know me completely. Not the carefully constructed version. Not the strategic persona. Me. Including the parts that aren't admirable. Jinho. I know it's complicated. I know my world is difficult to navigate. I know that being with me means accepting things you might not approve of. His eyes hold mine. But I also know that I haven't felt this alive, this human, this seen, since I was young enough not to know better. And if there's any chance you feel something similar, I need you to know that I'm choosing you. Completely. No strategies. No contingencies. Just, you. The silence stretches between us, full of weight and possibility. Here's why this moment changes everything. Because 6 months ago, I gave my coat to a stranger. An act that should have been simple, forgettable, gone in an instant like breath in cold air. But it wasn't simple. It was a bridge between worlds. A recognition of shared humanity that transcended every difference between us. And now I'm standing in the private space of one of Seoul's most powerful men, looking at my old coat preserved on his wall, while he tells me he's falling in love with me. I could say no. Walk away from the complexity. Return to my simple life teaching literature and grading papers. Or I could recognize that sometimes the most important connections come from the most unexpected moments. That power and humanity aren't opposites. That choosing someone means accepting all of who they are, shadows included. I feel it too, I say finally. This, whatever this is between us. I feel it. His expression transforms. Hope and relief and something deeper. But, I continue, if we're doing this, we're doing it honestly. No more protective interventions without telling me. No more mysterious problem solving behind my back. I need to be a partner, not someone you're managing. Agreed. And I need you to remember that I chose you knowing who you are. So you don't have to be perfect. You don't have to hide the difficult parts. I can handle complexity. I'm beginning to understand that. He moves closer. You're not what I expected when I sat in that subway entrance. What did you expect? Someone who would see the test. Who would calculate the benefit? Who would act strategically? His hand reaches up, gentle against my face. Instead, I found someone who just cared. Without agenda. Without strategy. You cared about a cold old man who couldn't offer you anything in return. And that broke through every defense I'd built. You weren't that old, I say, smiling. He laughs, and the sound is genuine. Unguarded. Come here, he says quietly. And I do. Seoul winter comes again, sharp and unforgiving. But this year, I'm not walking through the cold alone. Jinho and I have built something that doesn't have easy labels. I'm still a teacher. He's still who he is, powerful, influential, operating in spaces I don't fully understand. But we found a way to exist together that respects both our truths. I teach him about literature and he teaches me about power structures. I introduce him to my volunteer students and he introduces me to parts of Seoul's cultural world I never knew existed. We navigate the complications together, honestly, without pretense. And sometimes, on cold evenings, we walk through Dongdaemun Station together. Not to test anyone. Not to observe. Just to remember. Do you ever regret it? I ask him one evening as snow falls outside and we're warm in his apartment. Sitting there that night? Starting all this? He pulls me closer. I regret the 20 years I wasted before it. But that night? Never. What if I hadn't stopped? You would have, he says with certainty. Because you're exactly who you are. And who you are is someone who sees people others have learned to overlook. I think about the burgundy coat on his wall. About the green cashmere I'm wearing. About how one impulsive act of compassion created a connection neither of us expected. I'm glad I gave you my coat, I say. I'm glad you saw me, he replies. And in the warmth of his apartment, with Seoul spread out below us in patterns of light and shadow, I understand something fundamental. Power doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it arrives quietly, testing, observing, waiting to be recognized. But humanity? That announces itself through simple acts. Through giving your coat to someone cold. Through choosing compassion over convenience. Through seeing people as people rather than positions. I gave my warm winter coat to an old homeless man on a freezing December evening. He turned out to be one of Seoul's most powerful figures. But more importantly, he turned out to be someone who remembered what it felt like to be seen. Who valued that recognition more than any strategic advantage. Who chose to build something real with someone who'd shown him unplanned kindness. And together, we're rewriting what power looks like. Not through force or dominance. But through connection. Through honesty. Through choosing humanity even when strategy would be easier. Seoul winter is cold and harsh and unforgiving. But this year, we're keeping each other warm. If this story moved you, don't just watch quietly. Tell me in the comments, would you have stopped that night? Would you have given your coat, or kept walking? Stories like this remind us that small choices can change everything. If you believe kindness still matters in a hard world, like this video and subscribe for more stories where humanity wins.